Most of the time, when you lay out a wire with redstone, it'll be able to pass along a consistent pulse, like from a button or a lever. Sometimes it'll even be able to hold a specific signal strength, depending on how you build it and what you need it for. Alternatively, though, you could make your wire pass along pulses. While redstone can be tougher to work with this way and can be a bit slower, there are situations where pulse wires can be the way to go, since they generally pair well with observers and I think can be good for reducing lag, since they give off fewer block updates by using less redstone dust for just transporting a signal. I'm not too familiar with this area, but I think that's the major benefit of pulse wires. So, let's get into it. When putting together a pulse wire, you have some options. Most obviously, you can just use standard redstone dust wires. Doing this kind of defeats part of the point of working with pulses though, so I won't talk about that. Most commonly, you can send your signal across either powered or activator rails, chained together with observers. Since these rails don't actually emit any power of their own, you'll want to have plenty of observers handy to turn any pulses from the rails into a redstone signal. In some situations, you can use some blocks you might not expect to see in a redstone system. With the right setups, you can make use of how scaffolding, leaves, and walls chain block state changes to each other. For leaves, since they keep track of how far away the nearest connected log is, so they can decay if it's too far away, you can move a log back and forth near a string of leaves to pick up the update on the other side with an observer. This technique does have a maximum range of 6, and it does give multiple pulses near the log when pulling it away, but it can be handy for finally controlling what you're powering, or for working a wire through a tight and winding space. Scaffolding is similar, where it keeps track of how far away it is from a supporting block so that it knows when to fall. You can make use of this even easier though, since you don't even need a piston. Putting a stack of scaffolding on a trapdoor with another piece of scaffolding next to it will give a perfect setup for our scaffolding wires. These have some horizontal range to them, but they're mostly useful for sending a pulse upwards, since scaffolding doesn't have any height restrictions. Walls need a bit more setup to work, but they're still pretty handy. The block state we're messing with when working with walls is the one that decides whether or not it has a post in the middle of it. If you change that for a wall on top of a stack of walls, all of the walls below it will change to match. With a trapdoor at the top and an observer watching the bottom of the lowest wall, messing with the trapdoor will immediately send a pulse down to the bottom. The extensive setup you need mostly comes from the fact that for this to actually work, you need every wall in your tower to have a block on either side of it, so that it's actually able to go into its no-post form. Now that you know a bit about setting up these wires, I should mention one way that they can be used. Since these are commonly used in larger projects where optimizing your wires is important, it's not common that a single pulse is all you need to get across all the information that you're trying to communicate. As such, it's fairly common to use multiple wires to send a more complicated message, like a number higher than 1. And because you have a bunch of wires with 2 possible states, on and off, you can send larger numbers in the form of a binary coded decimal, or BCD. I've actually already covered how the standard BCD system works in its own video, so I'll keep my explanation here fairly short. You can think of a BCD number similarly to a regular decimal number, since they're pretty similar. It's just that instead of powers of 10, each digit of a BCD number represents a power of 2. So instead of the 3 smallest digits of a number representing how many 1s, 10s, and 100s you have, with BCD numbers they'll represent how many 1s, 2s, and 4s you have. While it's common to use multiple wires to send more data across a distance, with some carefully controlled timing, you can send all of this data through a single wire. You just need to be able to read a set of inputs on one side of your wire, turn that into a set of pulses, read that set of pulses on the other side, and turn the set of pulses into the same inputs from the start. One way of doing that would be to use this mess of redstone that I put together to illustrate this. There are plenty of other designs for systems to do this, and plenty of them are better than this, but this is the design I came up with, so it's the one I'm gonna tell you about. At the starting end, it's literally just sending a pulse across the wire, waiting a little bit, and sending pulses based on what input you gave, with a pause in between each potential pulse. Most of the crazy timing stuff happens at the receiving end of the wire. At this end, the first pulse basically just tells the rest of the system to get ready to receive a signal. This activates a pulse extender into a pulse shortener, basically just making sure this only happens for the first pulse that comes along. Then, that pulse shortener unlocks each of these repeaters in order, one after the other. The timing on this works out exactly so that the first repeater is unlocked exactly when your input's first bit's pulse would be arriving if you activated it, meaning whatever was being stored by that repeater is replaced by a copy of whatever you put in your input's first bit. The whole timing thing keeps going for each bit after that, meaning after everything's all done processing, the receiving end gets a copy of whatever you put into the sending end. Honestly, I probably didn't explain that very well, so if you understood that, good on you. Nice job. You get a gold star or something. Now, knowing all this is nice and all, but it's not especially helpful on its own, since Rails can't power redstone on their own. Because of that, it helps to know how to convert from pulse wires to binary and strength wires, and vice versa. Starting with pulse wires to binary wires, since it's pretty easy. Use observers. That's it. Depending on what behavior you want, you can throw a T flip-flop in there to make the pulse wire toggle the binary wire on and off. But still, observers. To go backwards, you can still use observers, but that might trigger too many times for what you need. If that happens, you can use your favorite pulse shortener design to turn a consistent signal into a pulse. As for converting to and from signal strengths, that gets a bit more complicated. Since pulse wires only send pulses, you need to get a bit creative to send across a specific number. One thing you could do is send a number of pulses across a single wire, but I don't want to design a machine for that. Instead, you can use multiple wires to send across a BCD number. Turning a signal strength into a set of pulses is pretty simple. You can just use an encoder like this. It looks intimidating, I know, but all that's going on here is a red coder hooked up to a bunch of individual lines. When the red coder gets a signal, one of the lines gets powered, which then sends pulses down some of the pulse wires depending on which line was powered. And the wires that get pulsed are based on the BCD representation of the number of the signal string. Another very wordy explanation. I hope that all made sense. To turn these pulses back into a signal strength, you can use a much simpler machine than the encoder, thankfully. All this does is just add up the individual bits. For each line, if this thing receives a pulse, it'll push up a composter, adding its signal strength to the total. Each composter is loaded with a different signal strength that corresponds to the digit that the wires are representing. So like, the composter on the 1's digit has a 1 signal strength coming out of it. The composter on the 2's digit has a 2 signal strength, and so on. In the end, this basically just means this thing adds up all of the values of the digits of a binary number and outputs the result. I'm going to go on a quick little tangent now because someone in the comments of my last redstone video wanted me to talk about instant wires, but that seems like a short topic that I don't want to dedicate a full video to, so I'm throwing it in at the end here. As the name suggests, instant wires give a method of making a redstone signal move instantly, without any delay. This is helpful for really big projects that need to react to something happening really far away, really quickly, but for redstone machines that are more normal size, like a standard piston door, or other stuff like that, using instant wire is generally overly expensive overkill that's just unnecessary. There are ways to make instant wires for binary and pulse wires. Strength wires can't be instant, at least to my knowledge, so if you need to send a signal strength really quickly, you can use one of the methods that I mentioned earlier to convert that strength into another type of signal, and then convert it back where you need to use it. To make instant transmission for binary wires, you can make use of this thing that I got off of the Minecraft wiki. It works because when you power this block here, the top piston gets activated and starts extending. This makes the redstone block temporarily stop existing as a block so it can be pushed over, meaning the piston on the bottom is immediately deactivated and starts to retract its block. Again, that makes the block that the bottom piston was pushing stop being a block temporarily, and that means the top piston is not being powered anymore. So, at the same time that it started extending to push its block out, the top piston has to retract. Luckily, since I'm talking about Java Edition, when sticky pistons are deactivated before they finish pushing their block, they end up leaving their block pushed out instead of pulling it back into place, meaning the redstone block can turn back into a block in its pushed out position and power the rest of the redstone line in the same game tick that it started being pushed. In the ticks after all this happens, the bottom piston realizes it's being activated again and extends, which activates the top piston, making it extend and readying the whole thing for when the input signal turns off. When that happens, nothing quite as crazy occurs. The top piston retracts, making the bottom piston retract and extend quickly, and that's pretty much it. As for pulse wires, you can use this design that someone smarter than me came up with. Honestly, I have no idea how this thing works. I'd love to talk it through like I do with most of the other stuff I show off, but I just don't have the knowledge that I would need to do that. Still, it's a good design that works pretty well. If you want to know more, like how to set it up or the real technical explanation of the thing, Kahyxen, the person who designed the little system to my knowledge, they have a video on their YouTube channel talking about it that I'll leave a link to in the description of this video. Otherwise, that's the last thing I have to say about redstone, so that'll take us to the outro. Oh hey, look at that, it's the outro of the video, like I said. If you're still here, thanks for watching all the way through the video, that's quite nice of you. If you like this one, I put out a video about binary and strength wires a couple weeks ago, so you might like that one too. Anyone who's already watched it, thanks for the attention. I want to say another quick thank you for watching and complimenting my videos. It makes me feel good. I'm glad I'm able to teach people about this thing that I'm fairly good at. Anyway, I'm all done yapping for now, so have a good day, observe your observers, and have fun doing some redstone.